And welcome to the Peters Suspension and Brakes AFL Outer East Division 1 and 2 footy show. And this week it's a great pleasure coming from the Cranbourne Football Netball Club. My name is Dan Lonergan. Matt Footy is with us as well as he is every week. And a big day for Monbolt's Shane Williams on the weekend. Apparently he was injured, but he still kicked 10 goals. Imagine what he'd do if he wasn't injured. Apparently he played in the midfield and wouldn't kick 10 goals. So do the Monbolt Hawks, who remain undefeated, want him playing forward and want him a little bit injured every week so he can kick 10 goals. We'll talk about that because the Hawks are undefeated and they've inflicted Pakenham's first loss of the season. Matt, great to have you with us. It was a terrific performance by Monbolk. They're looking pretty good.
Yeah, they're a very promising side at the moment. They look ready to go up if given the opportunity, and a well-run club, and the club rooms were looking splendid on the weekend. No hot water in the showers yet, so it was a bit downtrodden there, but the log cabin's got one more function left in it before they have to knock it down, unfortunately. But yeah, great day out of the Hawks' nest.
So if there was no hot water in the showers, that meant the players might have been muddy. If they were muddy.
Not muddy.
Yes.
Not muddy out at Monbolk now. Beautiful surface out at Monbolk. So no chances of being muddy. Maybe after the rain we've had this week and on Saturday and Sunday. But no, I think the cold showers might have just Pakenham players were thinking about the cold shower rather than the footy all day, and that might have cost them.
Oh, they weren't good enough, were they? Monbolk looks like they're the team to beat.
Yeah, Monbolk probably are the team to beat. They've got a game structure that looks like it'll work on big grounds as well. They press really high up the ground. At times, Pakenham had 3 loose forwards in their forward line. But Monbolk didn't care, pushed right up the ground, tried to squeeze Pakenham, who like to control the ball and hit targets around the ground. They squeezed up on them, made the angles a lot tighter, pressured the ball carrier, and Pakenham either kicked it long and high and was marked by about every Blackburn defender, about 6'3" and can jump, or if they tried to handle it through or short kicks, they were put under way too much pressure and just couldn't get through the zone. So it was a really, really good performance from Monbolk, and I think that game plan will still work on the big ground.
And tell us about Shane Williams, because as I said in the intro, he was injured. He was on one leg basically and kicked 10 goals. I mean, is he better for them playing forward?
It depends. Brody Emmett's out at the moment with a fractured foot, so there's a bit of midfield depth gone. But they're getting a couple of numbers back through their reserves as well now. They're starting to pick up some players there. I think his talent, he might turn into a sort of, I'm trying to think of a player off the top of my head, but I would probably play him the way he played on the weekend. He's a hard matchup because he's very smart. He read the flight. There was numerous occasions where the ball floated to the back of the pack and he was just standing there. It was an uncontested mark in a pack because players didn't read the flight of the ball quite as well as him, and he's quite strong as well. Probably plays a bit taller than what he is. So I would probably start him forward, and then if need be, you throw him on the ball when required. But he's a very talented player, very classy, and he missed one from the top of the square, so it could have been 11. But it was a beautiful game. He said he's kicked one bag of 10 before, and that was when he was injured as well, so he might just try and get injured all the time.
Well, talking of smart people, the coach is pretty smart, and he was lucky enough to go in the rooms and speak to Shane Williams after his big haul of 10 goals and Monbolk's big win over a disappointing Pakenham.
It's always great to come back to Monbolk. It looks like they're having a bit of a sort of send-off party or a ladies' night party for the old stand. Of course, the new stand, the bottom stand, is open, but it'll be officially opened in the not-too-distant future. Now, I've got Shane Williams with me. Shane doesn't really want to have a chat to me today because he's not the talkative type, he tells me. But guess what? Who's been speaking for the last 30 seconds, Shane? Me?
You have.
I have. Yep. So you don't have to worry, mate. But you've got to say something about the fact that, A, the team won, you're now on top of the ladder, you're undefeated, first home game, you win well, and you kick 10 goals. I mean, OK, you mightn't be the sort of guy that wants to talk a lot about yourself, but just talk us through some of the goals.
Obviously had a decent first quarter. Matchup was well for myself for the day, I thought, and they didn't change much, but that's good for myself.
So what went right, though? Like, how does somebody kick 10 goals? I've never done it.
Marking today was, I suppose, it fell into my hands a few times.
Yeah.
Just read it a bit better than a few others, and yeah.
So I heard a little whisper you could have probably kicked a couple more, but you missed a couple you should have kicked.
Yeah, I missed one from the goal square.
Yeah.
Don't want to talk about that one. But kicked it straight, kicked another one, 7-point play after it.
So how many had you kicked at that stage?
I couldn't tell you. That was, I don't even know, third quarter, maybe 7.
Is that your best in a game?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Coach. He's here tonight, of course, at Cranbourne. You can see him in the background. Wave, Coach. Thank you very much. One of the great men involved in the Outer East competition. Of course, Matt, it was ladies' night. That's why the coach was out at Monbulk, wasn't he?
Oh, exactly right. Old habits die hard, don't they, for the coach? He could sniff it a mile away. No, but it was pumping there when I had a quiet one after the game there after calling, and it was absolutely pumping in the log cabin, and I've been to a couple of functions there before. It's a nice atmosphere. It'll be sad to see it go.
So it's actually going? They're not just closing it down?
So the log cabin, a couple of the boys wanted to keep it as a sort of a bar, a grog pocket, if you will, obviously within, sensible restrictions, but which is I thought was quite a good idea. Everything else will move to the new pavilion, but I think it's part of the council deal that you get this big building and the ground restructuring and resurfacing. You've got to knock the log cabin down and put in a playground to make it viable for the community. So, look, it's not the worst thing in the world that there's a new playground going in and something like that, but yeah, I think the idea of the sort of grog pocket would have probably been a good financial one for them, but alas.
Well, they've got that at Upway Tacoma where we were last week, that magnificent grandstand, which just adds to the atmosphere. But then again, if that's what the council wants and the council are paying for some of it, yes, the council gets.
Yeah, exactly. Look, we can't have everything, can we? We're pretty lucky as it is. So Monbulk, everything's going in the right direction for Monbulk, so maybe the log cabin going might be another thing that just sort of works out for them.
Unbeaten on top of the table, disappointing day for Pakenham, but they're still 4-1 and looking okay. But they've got some work to do to try and get near Monbulk next time. Looking at the other results, Emerald 18-18, 126. They're on the board. They've beaten Wolverton Millgrove 4-4-28. That was a 98-point win. Did you think they could win? And certainly, did you think they could win by that margin?
Yeah, I think I tipped them. I definitely thought they could win because they were probably a team. I think I sort of slotted them in fifth. I helped out for the Pakenham Gazette with their predicted ladders. I think I slotted Emerald in at fifth. I had Pakenham in sixth, so I'm a bit wrong on that one. But Emerald definitely have a really good list, but I spoke to their footy manager on Monday and he was just talking about they're taking a while to gel. A lot of players that have come from different sports and had a couple of years off through travel and injuries, and they're just sort of getting used to it again. So that'll definitely be helping them as they're starting to gel together. I think Warby just stopped after half time. I don't think they're a 98 point worse team than Emerald, but Emerald are definitely a better side than they have been, and they've played 3 of the top 4 in the opening 4 rounds, so they were probably not as bad as an usual 0-4 side.
So they're not maybe a top 4 team, but they might be good enough to finish 5th.
Well, as we've mentioned last week, the team that finishes 5th in Division 1 and Division 2, and possibly even the Premier Division, is probably going to have a losing record. And Emerald definitely have some scoring power. Jake Petter kicked 4, Kieran Burns kicked 5. They've got Jared Donders back, who's a nice lead-up forward, and Rogan Goonan, who's an 18-year-old, kicked 3. So they've got plenty of scoring power. They showed that on the weekend. They play their home ground really well. They competed last year in the Division 1 in the Yarra Rangers on their home ground really, really well. So it'll be interesting to see how they go back on a bigger ground. They haven't been back out on those for a while. But Emerald will go fine. They're really positive, and they reckon there's a great vibe down the club, despite the fact they haven't won many games across both the footy and netball clubs. So, look, good things from Emerald. They're a nice side.
And they're well run, of course, by their president, Mark Petter, who, of course, sponsors this particular segment, the first and second division, Petter Breaks.
You've given it away now, Dan. You've made it biased why you've said that.
No, I haven't.
He's a good bloke, though,
I've heard he's a great bloke. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting Mark yet, but he, according to the coach, and the coach has met a lot of wonderful people in this world, all the great men and women that I met. Hello, Coach. I knew you'd come in.
Yeah, he's a great bloke. He's a great bloke, and they're a great club, and we're very lucky in the Outer East to have some really, really good clubs. That's all I'll say.
Thank you, Coach. It's a very quiet coach, isn't it?
And it's the first time the coach has mentioned anything on this show without dropping a name. So I'm very impressed. He's growing as a person.
He is growing as a person. He's been hanging around me long enough to know when to be sensible. Now, Officer had a 35-point win over Belgrave, and Mount Evelyn 51-point winners over Doveton. Just briefly on those games, any surprises there?
Surprised by the margin of Mount Evelyn's game. I think I tipped Doveton, but I think Doveton had a lot of marking targets, so I thought the smaller ground wouldn't bother them. I think going long and direct would sort of help their forward line, but Mount Evelyn are a pretty good team going forward. They've got a nice coach in Mark Fisher, so I wasn't surprised that they won, surprised that it was that big of a margin. But again, last quarter sort of blew that out. And then Belgrave, performance was pretty good from all reports, just couldn't quite get that cutting edge inside forward 50. Officer doing enough, but probably not as good as everyone thought in the pre-season. They should make the final still. They might be that 5th team, but definitely not as good as everyone else, as everyone, myself included, thought they would be at the start of the year.
Well, yes, they were hoping to come in and have an impact. They made the finals last year, but it's been a bit of an up and down start for the Rock.
And they were expected to. Well, their netball's going quite well, Rock, but they were expected to win the Premier. There was no mention of anyone else from the southeast. Mount Evelyn, Monbulk were mentioned, but not as much as Officer. So, and I've seen them a couple of times now. So. Yeah, they'll still make the finals, and once you make finals, anything can happen. Experienced players, but yeah, at the moment, the top four looks like it's a clearer top four.
Still a long way to go, though. Let's look at the selections for next week. Wolverton Belgrave hosting Monbulk. You'd think Monbulk comfortably?
Yeah, you think Monbulk comfortably, but Wolverton Belgrave only won 2 games last year, and they were both against Monbulk. And it cost Monbulk making the finals. Monbulk finished, I think, a game out of the 5. Hillsville finished in 5th on 40 points. Monbulk was 7th on 36 and lost 2 games to the bottom side. So, yeah, you never know. You never know. And Warby will definitely bounce back, and they're a good side at home. So Monbulk will be geared up for this.
Is that what cost them a spot in Premier Division?
Yeah, well, absolutely. It would seem that way. I'm sure there was other things that went into it. I wasn't around at the time those decisions were made, but the top 5 from last year, the finalists in Division 1, have gone into Premier Division. So who knows? And I think Monbulk would have definitely played pretty well in the Premier standard from what I've seen. Maybe
they weren't ready. Some teams mightn't be ready to go to the next stage, and they need a year in the level below.
I think it'll benefit them long term. Players are probably more likely, those with a bit of trepidation and might not be wanting the big challenge, might hang around for another year, and then they grow as part of the club. And the longer you're there, it's harder to leave. So it probably will help them in the long run. But I think the talent on the park at the moment would definitely compete.
Belgrave hosts Pakenham. Pakenham probably favourites, but gee, they want to improve. And as you said, they're more a closed-down side than a goal-scoring side. Do they need to find some more goal-scoring options?
Perhaps. They don't have a focal point. I think Dwayne Hope is their tallest player, and Baker Thomas isn't that tall for a ruckman. Their half-back, Josh Tynan, played an outstanding game. Wears a helmet, but he's a fantastic player, Josh Tynan. But their ball movement starts from half-back, and Monbulk closed them down by really squeezing up and making the dimensions really small. Not the ground at Monbulk's not that small, but as I mentioned before, they squeeze right up on them. Belgrave's ground is literally tiny, so Belgrave might squeeze up as well, but they won't have to as far as Monbulk. So it'll be interesting to see how Pakenham's controlling of the ball goes when there's not as much space to find that kick. They'll either have to be exquisite with their ball skills or learn to go long quickly and find a couple of marking targets somewhere. Pakenham should win it, but I wouldn't be surprised if Belgrave push them.
Officer at home to Mount Evelyn.
Big game for Mount Evelyn in the fact that Officer have won a couple in a row now, and it's at that bigger ground, and Officer lost to Monbulk earlier. Mount Ev, I think they'll learn from their game against Pakenham. They lost by 30 points on a big ground there, and Officer's not quite as big. If Mount Evelyn can win, it'll be a big shot in the arm for their confidence. Playing away from home, beating one of those southeast sides on their turf. Obviously need that win because they've lost to the other 3 sides above in that top 4 that we mentioned. And if they lose, then you absolutely say that they're not going to make the top 4. So it's a really, really interesting clash. It's definitely the biggest game in Division 1. I'm going to stick with the home side though. I tipped them to be the Premier. You've got to back them in a bit longer. So I'm going to go with Officer this week, but that's an absolute thigh rubber.
And Doveton and Emerald. Doveton again, the hosts in this match up against Emerald, but Doveton's form in recent weeks not brilliant.
No, Doveton's big ground. Emerald played at Pakenham in round 1 and were found out only kicked 2 goals 5. And from all reports, got the ball to half forward pretty well, but just couldn't find that target inside forward 50. But now Jake Petters hit some form. As I mentioned, Burns kicked 5, and that Jared Donders that they've got back is someone they need on that big ground, a lead up forward who can link midfield and forward line. So that's an interesting game. Doveton should get back on the winners list, but Emerald could push them.
Well, that's Division 1 done and dusted in the Outer East. Look forward to another great round of footy. We are at Casey Fields number 2, the Cranbourne Football Netball Club, and you're watching the Pettis Suspension and Breaks Division 1 and Division 2 footy show. Back to look at Division 2 in just a tick. On GameFace, welcome back to the Pettis Suspension and Breaks AFL Outer East Division 1 and Division 2 footy show. My name's Dan Lonergan, Matt Footy with me. We've looked at Division 1. Let's look at Division 2 from last week, and the match of the day, the 2 Yarras, Yarra Junction, 12-12-84 in a tight game, 24 scoring shots to the mighty River Pigs. Yarra Glen 10-15-75. I say mighty because I love the name, as I mentioned last week. That was a really good game of footy, Matt. Pretty tight as we thought.
Yeah, it was a really good game of footy. Definitely the match of the round for Division 2 last week. The interesting thing was I think Yarra Junction have just got so much depth through their midfield, through the whole ground. They've got so many match winners everywhere. Lee Hoffman the week before kicked 2 goals, best of field, didn't get named in the best this week. They've got a lot of speed, which a lot of sides in Division 2 don't have. And I wrote that Yarra Glen, if they were going to win, had to have Austin Smith and Blake Binion play really well. They did. Austin Smith kicked 3 goals off a win, and Binion was in the best players, but just wasn't quite enough because Yarra Junction have so much depth. But it shows a lot for Yarra Glen to show that they're going to be around the mark again if Yarra Junction are to slip up. But yeah, you can't go past the Eagles. They lost in round 1 to Powertown, but other than that, they have looked just superb.
They'd like that Powertown result back again, wouldn't they?
Yeah, a little bit. It's a little bit of a local rivalry, 2 close towns, and Powertown were up and about this year, 100th year, so kicking it off at the start of the year like that, they were up and about. And Powertown's ground is one where you can get scored against pretty quickly, so all Powertown had to do is make the most of 10 minutes of momentum and you can kill a game.
Talking of Powertown, got beaten by Kinglake, the top team, 15-18-108 to 10-13-73. Would they be happy with that because the margin was 35, or that's just a true indication of the two teams, Matt?
I think that's a last quarter sort of push out from Kinglake as well. So Powertown probably disappointed that they couldn't put 4 quarters together, and that's something James Icano had mentioned previously to me, that they haven't quite put 4 quarters yet besides that round 1 game. But Kinglake are a really good side. They've got some, like we've mentioned, Andrew Fairchild and Chris Horman are a really, really good dynamic duo up forward. Kinglake now have got Yarra Junction, they've got Thornton Eildon, I think, this week, or I can't remember off the top of my head who they've got. But they've got Yarra Junction and Seville in a fortnight after that, and that'll be the real test to see where they're at, because they'll definitely make finals, obviously. But like I said, Yarra Junction, the team who beat Seville, made the grand final last year, so that'll be the making of them. But Powertown won't be too bothered, and Kinglake will be pretty chuffed that they're still undefeated.
I know you didn't make the word up or the phrase up, Matt, but where they're at and structures are the 2 words in football that drive me mad. Seville, 16-20-116, and in the words of the late great and a good friend of mine, Drew Morford, spifflicated, which means bigger and more ferocious than annihilation, according to Drew. Beat Alexandra 5-15-45. They've won by 71 points, 36 scoring shots to 20. Maybe Alexandra should have been closer, but maybe Seville should have won by more. A lot of maybes, could-haves, would-haves in there.
That word spifflication, are you saying that the 75 points is a spifflication? It's bigger than annihilation?
I think it is. Annihilation's 10 goals. I reckon spifflication's bigger than annihilation,
so
yes.
What was that Emerald 98.1? What would you put that in?
Double spifflication.
Oh, not a pantsing? I like pantsing.
Pantsing's probably 40 to 45 points.
Oh, okay.
A thrashing is probably just after that. Comfortable wins 5 goals.
Okay. Well,
you happy with that?
I'm happy with that now that I know.
Remember, opinions are like backsides. We've all got one. That's just my opinion about what phrases you can use in results.
I'm going to use it now. The Dan Lonigan order of defeats. Seville got back on the winners list. There was a big game for them to make sure that they didn't slip up. It's a big month for them with injuries. Did really well. 16-20. Dylan Broadway kicked 6, so that's not all the tall forwards. Nathan O'Keefe still popped up with a couple, but good to see they've got some versatility down there. Alex, disappointed, but sometimes these clubs put the cue in the rack if the game's gone at half time, and that may have occurred.
Former North Melbourne player Nathan O'Keefe made a promising start to his league career a few years ago when he played for the Kangaroos. Of course, looking for a new permanent coach in the AFL if you've been under a rock for the last week or so.
We know a coach that might want to throw his hat in the ring.
Yeah, we'll have to ask him whether he'd be interested. He seems to be telling
He's interested in something else at the moment.
He is. We'll come back to him. Of course, there are more people in the room. No, we were just trying to find out whether the coach might be interested, our coach, in coaching North Melbourne. Because we're talking about Nathan O'Keefe, who is a member of the Seville football team, had a big win on the weekend, as we mentioned. That spifflication, played a few games for North Melbourne 4 or 5 years ago. Now, Gembrook Cockatoo, this is an annihilation. Or a spifflication again, because it was about the same result. So I need to say spifflication, the S word. Gembrook Cockatoo, 18-21-129. Yay, that doesn't have a river. 89-57, or a Lake.
No. Yea are improving each week, so their clash with Thornton Eildon that's coming up in a few weeks is, initially it looked like the shin boners would win that easily, but Yea are improving every week, and it's good to see. Gembrook back in the 5 now, showing some real signs. Hamish McIntosh kicked 8, speaking of former Roos, so and I've seen the jumper he's wearing at the moment. It's quite a tight fit, so a bit interesting there.
He's been in a good paddock?
No, I think there's just a small jumper for a tall man. So Gembrook going pretty good guns. This weekend's clash against Seville will be the one I'll be at, and it'll be interesting to see who they've got. I think they might have Hamish, not Tarkin, but Gembrook Cockatoo doing nicely at the moment. They'll want to get a win against one of the big 3 now, and this is their opportunity.
Great bloke, Hamish McIntosh. Just injuries cruelled what would have been a promising career. Now the ladder, Kinglake, 5 straight wins, going really well. Yarra Junction in second after 1 loss. Yea stay on the bottom. This week, Gembrook, Cockatoo and Seville. Pretty big game.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I'll be out there at Gembrook Cockatoo past Players Day as well. So I was conned into it by my co-commentary partner Leo Gronewegan, of course, another ex-North Melbourne player, and Gembrook stalwart and Nathan Walsh in the stats chair, both Gembrook boys. So we're heading out there to watch that one. Like it's probably now. Initially, it was big for Seville because in case they'd lost to Alex, but now it's probably bigger for Gembrook, as I mentioned just before. If they can get a win against one of those top 3 or 4 sides, which is Seville, Kinglake, Yarra Glen, Yarra Junction, it'll really put them back in the mix. For premiership contention. There was a lot spoken about them in the pre-season with their recruits and stuff like that. So it's a big clash for them, and Seville, if they can knock off Gembrook, they'll steady themselves down. They'll probably be guaranteed a final spot, and then they can maybe rest a couple of blokes that might have a few niggles after their Yarra Junction clash later in the year.
Can Kinglake remain undefeated as Alexandra travel to take on them? You'd have to say probably on paper and on form, yes, but football's a funny game, Matthew.
It is a funny game, and like I said, if Alex are in a game at half-time, I back them to take it close. So Kinglake will want to kill it early, and I expect them to be able to do that, and they'll probably have one eye. They won't say this, but they'll have one eye in the clash with Yarra Junction.
The River Pigs, Yarra Glen are at home to Powertown.
Big ground, which will help the River Pigs. Powertown's ground is quite small, but Powertown, again, another side who on their day could beat anyone. James Acano just wants them to put 4 quarters together, and the River Pigs, they'll want to get back on the winners list. I'm going to stick with the River Pigs, but Powertown, again, a good side if they can put 4 quarters together.
Yes, certainly, as you mentioned, their celebration this year of 100 years, and they're putting in some good performances. If they can just be a bit more consistent, it'd be wonderful for the comp. Yarra Junction are also hosting Thornton Eildon.
Yeah, big win for the Eagles. They'll rest a few blokes before that game against Kinglake in a couple of weeks. But yeah, could be a big win for them. Thornton Eildon, they're going well, but the dam might be about to burst.
Thank you, Matt. Always good to have you here, and it's great being here at Cranbourne. Hello, Coach.
Hello, I just thought I'd drop in about that body of water thing that we had last week. Of course, that was Sylvan Dam I was talking about for anybody watching last week.
How big's the dam?
Well, it's a massive dam.
It's a massive,
but unfortunately for you, Coach, yes. Sylvan were a part of the Yarra Rangers, the Yarra Valley Mountain District League, but they're now in the Eastern Football League.
Oh, well, that has absolutely no relevance whatsoever. Maybe it does, I don't know. But anyway, here, Matty, there is a body of water inside Casey Fields, just over there a little bit. I don't know the actual name. I asked a couple of the girls here, they didn't know either. But there is a big lake at Cranbourne Racecourse.
Well, there you go. We've got one. We've found a body of water.
Well, we needed to find one. It was vital, wasn't it? The coach wouldn't have slept. He would have been fretting. So that's it. Division 2 for another week. Thanks for watching the Pettis Suspension AFL Outer East Division 1 and Division 2 footy show. Wonderful to have Pettis Suspension as our sponsor of this show. We'll be back with more First Division and Second Division football for the Outer East from another Outer East venue next week. Get your GameFace on.